Good morning. So I spoke yesterday of the tariffs that Trump was introducing, the reciprocal tariffs, right, on countries that had tariffed or have active tariffs on America. And I found out after that the pharmaceutical companies or industries, Trump later said that they're still thinking of that and a decision will be made on that in the future, right? So that's just kind of there hanging over people, right? And he also said, which is interesting, that tariffs put us in a good position to negotiate, okay? So tariffs need not be a perpetual thing, something that goes on forever, right? But what I want to talk about here is the context in all of this, right? Because there's pros and cons to each thing, right? And I think it was Sophocles who said that every great innovation in man comes with a disaster, right? Every great idea produces a catastrophe while also producing greatness in itself, right? But the way technology is at the moment, right? Everyone is plugged into television, maybe not so much anymore, but people still watch it, right? But they're plugged into information that they probably never would have been privy to 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And naturally, when you're dealing with the information of the world in a day, you can only pay so much mind to each individual thing, right? And stories get carried and dropped and other new ones picked up and put on the conveyor belt, and then their time is up and then that story is dropped and a new one is up, to the point where it doesn't allow for serious thinking on any given topic, right? Because it's there in front of you, we're told what it is, and then it's moved on again, right? It is essentially propaganda, right? And if you don't want to call it propaganda, you can call it reporting of information where the conclusion is wrapped up in the sharing of that information. So just at the very same time you're introduced to this probably new topic, you're also given a conclusion about it. And there's also like a moral layer soaked into the delivery of it, right? So it's kind of wrapped up in a bow, delivered to you, finished. The decision that we want people to have or the conclusion we want people to make on this topic is also, here you go, and then we move on to the next one. So people go, grand, look, that's done and dusted, sure. People all think this is bad, must be. And then on to the next one, right? And that handicaps people because there's not, look, obviously there's only so much time you have in your life, there's only so many thoughts you can have, there's only so much attention you can give to any area of life or any detail or any topic, right? But when you actually pause and look at what's going on in the world, right, and then reflect on what has been going on in the world over the last few years as well, it allows for a little bit more clarity, and it allows you to step out of the consensus of what everyone else has concluded about a topic, because that's the delivery system, right? So when you see people, they have their mind made up about really complex situations and scenarios, and it just happens to be in line with what the mainstream media of whatever country it is also saying, you know that they're just repeating the delivery system. And worse off, they've actually become part of the delivery system, right? But I wanted to talk about tariffs here, because people are saying that tariffs are bad innately. And not only are they bad innately, but they're bad because they will cause inflation, they will crash economies, and they will leave you out of pocket, right? If that was cut in stone, then why do most countries have tariffs on one country or another? Because the logical conclusion of that idea that tariffs are innately bad is that all of these countries must be suicidal. And that sounds like a nonsense, but you could make the argument that many Western nations are indeed suicidal, right? But it's not just Western nations. It's other nations as well, like China, for example. They have one of the the greatest economic success stories of probably all time over the last couple of decades, since the 90s, right? But they put tariffs on other nations, and they seem to be doing all right. I don't know the ins and outs of it. People can quibble with it or argue with it all they want, but on the face of it, from what we're told, China looks to be doing great stuff. For themselves anyway, right? So what is it with tariffs? Have we seen tariffs crash economies before? We've a good control, a partial control group, right, to compare what's going on now or what might happen in the future with what has come before. Because Donald Trump has levied tariffs or placed tariffs on foreign nations before. In his first 4 years, right, he put tariffs on Mexico, he put tariffs on, I think, Canada, and he put tariffs on China in relation to steel specifically, right? Mainly steel. And based on that, he took in about 70 billion euros from that, right? Just from those tariffs alone, of which I think he gave about 20 billion to American farmers. And you'll remember this if you've been listening to him, right? This is what he did. Put your moral judgment aside. These are facts. He took in at least 70 million from these tariffs in his first term, and he gave about 20 billion of that to farmers to obviously help them, right? So and that left about 50 billion additional money, right, or additional funds in the treasury of America, in the bank account of America, right? And that could be spent any kind of way you want, right? And what Trump looked like he was doing was reinvesting that money into infrastructure in America, revitalizing highways, doing up ports, building up the infrastructure, right? Which creates more jobs, which keeps the money flowing in America, which makes America's economy blossom. But that got shut down. How? It got shut down with COVID, right? Where all of a sudden everywhere needs to collapse in on itself and shut down because this thing is the most fatal, it is the most transmissible, it is doomsday itself on legs, right? Which turned out not to be the case. We can reflect on it now and say, well, that was a big, massive mistake, because we have Sweden who did not lock down. They suggested it, right? But they didn't make it mandatory. They kind of suggested it and left it to people's good conscience. If you wish to do so, this is what we believe will help. Go and do it. They had a spike in excess deaths at the start, but it kind of leveled off, right? So they didn't do any worse over the long term than countries like Ireland, who had one of the worst lockdowns on the planet, right? So they were equalized. So we can see on reflection now that locking the country down, shutting down economies, that was a disaster. That was a massive disaster. And all that served to do really was put countries into debt, more debt, right? Because if the economy is not really running, you're not producing money, you still need money in order to pay people to stay at home, essentially. Pay pubs not to open up. That's what was going on, right? Pay restaurants not to open up. People that own some properties are making massive money on just not opening up, right? By towing the government's line. They were getting paid for it. Same thing now, right? But you need to print more money for that, and we are not allowed to. Well, we have foregone our ability to print our own money in this country. So we have to borrow money. We have to borrow money, and there's debt attached to that money, and there's interest attached to that money. So we dug our debt hole even deeper with our response to COVID, right? But what's fascinating about that is you also see one of the first things that Trump did when he got into office this time was he went after the USAID, right? Which has been hemorrhaging American wealth and just handing it out across the world, right? USAID has also been involved in funding studies on coronavirus, in funding these organizations that spearheaded the response in America, at least, and the West followed, right? to COVID-19. So what would have happened if COVID didn't happen? We don't know. But it's beginning to look like COVID, it can be argued at least, right, that COVID was a way of stopping a blossoming American economy. And why would you want to do that? Simple. If you have a leader in a country, and look, also, we'll roll it back to 2016. I'm sorry for jumping around here, right? But Donald Trump, since he decided to run for president and decided to say some things, notably, I think, he spoke of the desire to stop human trafficking and child exploitation across the planet. And there's a few other things that he spoke about which brought the wrath of the status quo down on top of him, right? And you can say it's all an act, whatever. I don't know that, so I'm judging at what I'm looking at, right? The whole world nearly unanimously turned against Donald Trump. And everyone you talk to nearly has the same opinion of him, which might have changed over time. Some people seen it for what it was at the time and they were like, no, this is a bit of a difference and we'll have a go with this. But most people, again, because we don't have time to reflect on things, or we don't take the time to reflect on things, there's nearly a tacit acceptance that Donald Trump is bad because we've all been told he's bad for so long that it must be true, otherwise people wouldn't be saying it, right? Where does that come from? That comes from significantly powerful enemies that the man obviously has or created, right? Or that he ended up having as a response to what he wanted to do with America. So were these enemies in a position to create a scenario which would lead to the shutting down of a growing economy? Absolutely, of course, right? Of course. So why would they want to do that? If you have a leader who is coming into power and has been elected by people who have become totally disenfranchised with the status quo, they do not believe that they're being listened to, they do not believe that their money is being spent to benefit them in any way. Their life is becoming more difficult, the unemployment is rising, right? Being able to forge a good career in something you're skilled at and something you love is nearly, it's the exception to the rule now, right? A lot of people have to work jobs just to get paid so they can keep the family lights on and they can keep feeding people and they can pay their debts and they can carry on and hope that their children do 10% better than they do, right? But they were seeing over generations that just wasn't happening. That was going the other way, right? So they see in Donald Trump someone who looks like he's going to stand up for something better, and they get behind that. And that rattles the status quo, right? Because the status quo have been making millions and millions and millions off destroying America, and in Ireland as well, destroying their own Western nations, right? And the lives of people, of the native people of those countries. So why would they want to shut down that economy? Because if it was shown, as I think it would have ended up being, right, that Donald Trump gets in 2016, he applies tariffs to countries, he brings in tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of extra money, he reinvests that, right, into the infrastructure of America, which creates more jobs, which creates a better ability to conduct business across the country, rail lines, ports, all that sort of stuff, right? Farms, all of that. More and more people would start to recognize that, right, look, even though I might not like him, I might even hate the way he carries himself and talks, but my neighbour's life is getting better. My life is getting better. I have more money in my pocket. I'm not as stressed as I used to be, right? I have options now. My children have options now. I'm not looking down the barrel of a shotgun of having to sell my family's land that I had for generations, right? I might actually be able to pass this on. I might actually be able to pass this on as a functional farm to my children, right? And on and on and on. If people began to see that, because it was happening, right? Who do you think they were going to vote for? They're going to vote for the new status quo, which is actually benefiting them, right? So I think this is what Trump is doing again. He's saying it now as well, that he's going to bring in trillions in new investment and hundreds of billions in tariffs. And that looks like it's going to be reinvested back into the infrastructure of America. Are his friends and companies going to make billions off of these new ventures? Of course they are. Of course. But if you have companies and industries that are creating wealth off of the backs of, again, American workers in America, and that money is staying in America, and a good chunk of that money is being reinvested back into America, who does that benefit? America. Right? It benefits America. And they have a big enough and bold enough vision of themselves at the moment that they could become totally self-sufficient. There's no reason why why they may need anything from other areas or other nations, right? So they might actually, that wealth or that attitude towards wealth and towards an actual sovereignty, an actual self-determination, right, of being responsible for the wealth of your own nation and not having that wealth be dependent on other nations. That's a freedom that I don't think any Western nation has seen in a long time. And that is it's such an American thing, right? It's a real cowboy kind of attitude to 21st century living. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think more power to them. And if that benefits them and that stops people becoming addicted to drugs and stops people overdosing and stops people killing themselves because they have a bit of hope in the future, Jesus, how can you argue with that, right? More power to you, lads. Off you go. But that attitude looks, because of Trump being a global pinnacle of attention, right? Everyone wants to see what he's doing because a lot of people want to see him fail, right? But what if he doesn't? What if he doesn't? And it doesn't look like he is, right? He told Zelensky in the office that you don't have the cards, right? Trump looks like he has the cards. And it looks like America is on a great road moving forward. Now, what does that do for Ireland? Very little based on the benefits it gives to American people. But indirectly it may have, right? Because if American people have more money, more time, more attention, more choice, and they can smell and feel that freedom again, then that's going to trickle into other nations as well. That optimism for life again, right? That is going to trickle into other nations. If other nations accept it, and other people, individuals of those nations accept it, you, me, the guy at the bar, whatever, right? And it shows a way out, right? Because in Ireland, we are burdened. We choose to burden ourselves with retarding our own vision by rendering it so short-sighted that we just take snippets like a movie film. We take things frame by frame. We take the frame, we judge the frame, we spin it through, we judge the next frame. But there's very, very few people that you see actually running a string through the whole thing, right? We just knee-jerk react to things and then move on to the next thing. And we fail to see the unfolding story that is occurring here, right? And people can argue or differ on what they're seeing, but I don't think I think what I'm saying is based on fact, right? These things are based on things we know that happened, right? And therefore, because they have happened before, they are quite likely to happen again. Because people are aimed that way. But what this is shown in Ireland is that there's an opportunity. There's a way out, right? And I think in Ireland's case, it's quite simple. We are being crippled by our relationship with the European Union. It's as simple as that. Not only do we put in more money into it than we take out, we are also legally subservient to the EU. EU law supersedes national law, which means that we cannot create a law that is repugnant to the EU, because they can trump that, no pun intended, right? But their decision we will have to carry out. And it only looks like there's a bit of freedom around that because Irish politicians have always fallen in line with the EU. So we've never seen what happens when an Irish politician or the Irish people stand up and say, yeah, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Right? But I think the time for that is now. We've enough of it, right? Enough of it. Like, we've people sitting in Brussels who've never been in Ireland making decisions on what Irish people can do with their pillows, what type of fabric they have to have in them, right? What kind of light bulbs we have to have, what we do with our cars, right? We've the NCT, which is like a Spanish company that runs the operations of it, right? 70-80% of the money they make off that, they say, goes back into the production of it. But they make a profit off it, and they keep that profit. That's money that we're just throwing away. Out of your pocket and out of my pocket, right? And this is because of the EU. The EU says your car should be like this, therefore use the NCT and spend all these millions over to Spain, right? It's the same thing with the tolls on our roads. This money is coming out of your pocket and leaving Ireland. It's gone. Ireland is poorer every time you put money into one of those toll booths. Every time you pay for the NCT. All these stupid things. These regulations that stop people. It kills creativity. And it kills people's desire to try anything. Right? So when you have decades of people not wanting to try anything, and their creativity and innovation being killed and neutered, people just go, well, what's the point? Nothing can happen anyway. Right? And that's the position that we're in at the moment, where any sort of different way of looking at something gets shot down instead of thought about. Right? Anyone can shoot down another person's idea or another person's idea or vision of something, right? But you should spend more time actually just thinking about it, reimagining a different way. Because if you're a grown man or a grown woman, and you're of the position that things will always be the same, your imagination is dead. Your imagination, you have killed yourself. You have killed your own imagination. Because you can't imagine a different way than what is going on at the moment. Right? But so we need to re-look at our relationship with the EU, because it's not a reciprocal one. It's not a reciprocal one. Right? And our relationship with the IMF. What are we getting into bed with these people for? We put ourselves in massive debt to the IMF. And because of our relationship with that, and being a member of that, we have to open up. We legally are not allowed to hinder any foreign investment into this country. We have to keep free trade, nice and liberal. Otherwise, we're breaking the law, essentially. We're breaking our policy with the IMF, right? And then what happens? Well, then they just destroy the country by recalling in the debt that you don't have, right? They bankrupt you if you don't play ball. So people that got Ireland into bed with these sorts of cartels, ye did not do Ireland any benefits. We might have coffee shops and a few other things around at the moment, right? And you can make your claim for it all you want. We're much better off than we were 40 years ago. In what context? In looking more like a big shopping mall context? Absolutely. Absolutely. We're doing better off because we have more things. But we're a slave race now. We're a slave race. And that's best epitomized in people that see no way out and see no change, no potential for change in this country. That is the attitude of a slave. Right? It's even worse than an attitude of a slave. You would hope that at least a slave might have a desire that one day they will be free. These people, this sort of thinking it's the Walking Dead sort of thinking. I struggle even to think what keeps people going with that sort of thinking. With no hope. Fated to live a life that you don't really like, but you can't see any way out of it. Right? Now, so I think we need to reevaluate ourselves in our relationship with the EU. Are we benefiting from it? I don't know. Is there an alternative? To the benefits, people might make the argument that we're economically more viable and better off because of our relationship with the EU, because we're allowed to trade within the EU bloc, right? Look at where we are in the world. We've England beside us, not the EU. We've America beside us, not the EU. We have massive trading partners there, right? And the regulations as well. They absolutely hinder some of the biggest natural resources we have, including the thousands and thousands and thousands of years of acquired experience and knowledge that our farming people have. Well, if that's gone, you don't get that back. That's intergenerational knowledge and wisdom, understanding of the land and the world and time. You can't teach that in school. You can go and get your Green Cert, but you can't teach that in school. That's something that is handed down, right? That is handed down. You can't teach that. You can't teach that. You either know it or you understand it, and farmers understand it, right? Politicians claim they know it. Farmers understand it. And farmers are hindered by the regulations from the EU, right? We should have booming farms, even more than what we have now, right? We have the technology, we have the ability, we have the communication networks to be able to do that, okay? So, re-look at our relationship with the EU. Is it benefiting us? I don't think it is. Any benefit that it has, I think, is negated by the downside of our relationship with it, which is we don't get to make our own laws that aren't approved by the EU or that wouldn't be in line with the EU. And we're also regulated out of existence. And in addition to that, then, we have to keep our market here. We have to keep our economy open to foreign investment, which in a small country is absolute suicide, because you just have bigger countries with bigger wallets that just come in and buy up everything. That's a guarantee. That is a 100% guarantee. That is business. That's what's going to happen. So if different nations own good chunks of your country, is it even yours anymore? And why are there no politicians even talking about that? You never hear that. You never hear that from any of these politicians. You might hear people talk about the vulture funds and stuff, but do they really break it down and go into it as to what allowed that to happen in the first place, and what will guarantee that that continues on into the future based on our being locked into the EU? You don't hear that. You don't hear honest conversations. You hear political talking points and point scoring. No one benefits from that, only politicians, right? And I've no issue with politicians, provided that they're doing the job they say they're signing up to do, right? But yeah, so in terms of solutions, what could Ireland do? I think, number one, we're at absolutely nothing until you can get people to look at the situation honestly and seriously. Because once the problems are fleshed out and they're on the table in front of you and they're being spoken of truthfully, in good faith, right? And we're not trying to win an argument. I'm not trying to win an argument against someone. I'm trying to share what I think to be the truth of reality with people. And then you can make up your own judgment on that. But can we at least agree that we're working in good faith and we're trying to get to the core of what's going on here? Because it's only when you truly identify what the issues are that the solutions come. Because the solutions are built into the problem, right? If kicking your door frame every morning hurts your toe, the problem is kicking the door frame. The solution is don't kick the door frame, right? Identifying the problem equals the solution in a lot of instances. People can say you're oversimplifying it. Things are simple. Things are simple. Those that wish to overcomplicate it are trying to deceive you in some way. Because things are and should be simple, right? And if it's too complicated that you need to go to college for 10 years to understand it, then it's not worth dealing with. Unless it's some applied science or something, right? But if it's ideas and morality, no, I'm not accepting that. I'm not accepting that. And they'll try and play that card again. There's the tone of the stupid Irishman, right? That if you're oversimplifying something, which Irish people do, and because through thousands and thousands of years of experience, we understand human nature, right? We understand it. So our reaction to that and our solution to some issues are very simple because we see it as simple, because we've made it simple, because we understand it, right? So when people are trying to say you're oversimplifying these issues, I would say to them, no, you're not. Or I'm not. You're just trying to overcomplicate it because you don't want to resolve the issue. And most times a lot of people's jobs and their money is built into these issues continuing, right? This is understandable and this is observable when you look around. So what are some of the solutions? Be bold and understand it. The first thing we need to do is understand that we do not need to stay this way. We can create a different world, different life, right? In Ireland as Irish people, and we just need to get off the fence a little bit and start to believe in that. So what we could do, I think the EU is probably dead on its feet now at the moment, right? And I think it's a perfect time for us to throw our weight around a little bit and assert ourselves, right? I think we need to look at that. We need to look at the fact that we do not want to be plugged solely into the EU market anymore. We want to be free to fish our own waters. That is ours. We want to be free to dig our own oil. That is ours. And we want to be free to be able to make any sort of deals we can with any other nations, because that's our business, right? That is for the benefit of our people, and that has got nothing to do with the EU. And if you don't accept that, we're out of here. We're gone, because our relationship with the EU is killing people. It's not good. It's a parasitic relationship where we open ourselves up to being fed on continuously for decades and decades, and our people die and leave this country as a result of that. And we are left here to deal with the consequences of that, which is being bolted to an open market that is totally vulnerable to foreign occupation, be that in terms of industry and companies, or be that in terms of people actually coming here demographically, right? So after we've decided that we actually do want something better, and we can come to understand and believe that there is a way, or there's at least the potential of things being better in the future if we choose to make it so, what we could also do, if we were coherent in our understanding with each other, is print our own money. Print our own money. There's nothing legally stopping us from doing that. The only legal requirement as part of being in the EU is that we don't try and undermine or undercut the euro as the dominant currency in Europe. And to that we will just say, that's not what we're doing. We are printing off our punt again. Lovely, beautiful currency with some of the finest minds and hearts on our currency, and some of the most beautiful gifts of nature on our currency. Actual proper money, right? Beautiful stuff. Irish aesthetics all over it. We are printing off our own money. We're only using it domestically, right? And we will start giving these money out to Irish people that want to get a leg up and want to start their own little company and start businesses, right? And I would invest heavily, heavily, heavily in the natural resources we have, right? Any boat that's out there plundering Irish seas, move on, lads. We're not having it anymore. That's ours. You have your own, right? This is ours. Invest in fisheries. Start teaching young fellas fishing in school. Girls as well, if they're interested, right? Start teaching these skills. Start investing in our ports. Start investing in island living again. Start investing in all of these things. Start investing in infrastructure. Get proper Wi-Fi out to all areas, right? Start investing in ports, roads, farms, oil, bogs, fuel, all of it, right? There is no reason why there can't be 1,000 new little farms, right? Start investing back into the things that we do well in this country. We're builders as well in this country. We build things. We're great at making things. Start investing in that. Start investing in trade schools. School, I think, is on its deathbed. The way school has been run in this country, across the West, right? Anyway, generally, is a nonsense, right? And based on the times that we're in, I don't think it needs to be the way it is. I think we're also hindering people by keeping them in school to the age of 17 and 18 before they can go out and get a trade, if that's what they want, right? I think we need to recognise the talents that are in different kids. They might not be academically smart, right? But they're practical. They're hand users, right? You see this. You see this in your own experience. Kids that are probably considered a little bit slow in school at reading and stuff, they're great dancers, right? They're great dancers, or they're DJs, right? They use their hands. They're brilliant with crafts. They're brilliant with wood. They build and make things. They're brilliant for making little weapons when you're young, little galabandis, right? It's nearly always the kid that's not great in school that's well able to throw these things together. They'll fire a camp up for you there in 2 seconds and have a firelight in even less time, right? Start plugging into the gifts and talents that Irish people have and Irish kids have, right? Start investing in that again. Print our own money to use just for that purpose, right? And if the EU have anything to say about it, then so what? So what? America looks like a shining hope now that we could do great business with, right? And I think it's just time that we start to look at that and go, you know what? Times change, things change. Something that might have been good for us and dug us out of a hole, pulled us out of a hole there 50, 70 years ago, it's not serving its purpose anymore. It's becoming a little bit overbearing. It's draining more than it's putting back in. It's not benefiting us. Our country needs a rejuvenation. A lot of things need to change in this country. Our kids need a little bit of hope because they're killing themselves and they're getting addicted to nonsense, right? They're forfeiting their lives in this country. And I don't think we need to stand for that. But the first thing we need to do is recognise, number one, that there's a problem. And number two, of course there's a solution. And of course there's a potential for difference in the future. Why wouldn't it be?